Hello and welcome back to another document deep dive. And this time we're kind of looking at a similar situation as before, only this time it's the Germans who are attacking a strong point held by the Russians that is a bit forward of the line. And I thought this was quite interesting. Now, before we do that, real quick, an overview over the units involved. Now, first of all, this is the 88th Infanterie-Division, or 88th Infantry Division rather. A German unit, obviously. And this is what it looked like just before that operation that I mentioned on the 20th of March 1942. And this division at this point had just been sent to the Eastern Front. They had been up to this point in France. They had taken part in the French campaign, and after that were on garrison duty. And in the middle of December 1941, they were sent over to the Eastern Front, and they were now in the Kursk sector. And this is what they looked like, just real quick. Fairly typical infantry division, although some of these units are fairly under strength. Like over here, we only have two companies in a battalion and with very few machine guns per company, so there were either some losses already or some stuff that just wasn't up to snuff even this early. And yeah, don't want to spend too much time on this. I just really quickly, before we get to the meat of it, rough situational overview. You can see here is Kursk. The 48th Corps is here, and they're part of that 88th Infantry Division up here, facing to the east, the Russians being here. And the situation at this time was somewhat fluid. And this is where the Germans, having just arrived at the front, they wanted to start trouble right away because they hatched a scheme. And that scheme was called Unternehmen Auferstehung, or Operation Resurrection, which is a pretty cool name, which is why every bad Hollywood movie in the mid-2000s kind of had that in their title. So yeah, Operation Resurrection, what was that all about? So this folder begins with a little intro here. And basically it says that the main battle line that was won during the battles in January, due to it being kind of swung around in its course, and because they don't have a lot of strong forces to hold it, it's not ideal, not an ideal defensive position. And the enemy strong point of Kalinov is a ever-present danger, because it kind of juts into, if that's the word, into the German defensive position as a springboard for enemy operations. So because of that, they wanted to destroy this strong point at the village of Kalinov. This here is a divisional order for what at this point was still called Operation Kalinov. As you can see, they crossed that out and put Auferstehung or Resurrection above it, so this was kind of a work in progress at this point. In fact, there are some different versions of this order, but in general, the gist of it is always the same. So the order is that the 88 Division will get Kalinov under its control and completely destroy or imprison the crew of this enemy strongpoint. After that, they will quickly create the new plan for the spring main battle line from Kridazovo to the height east of Kridazovo to height 248.9 to Kalinov, and the height east of the Three Finger Valley to Yevrozimovka for defense. So that's what their end goal was, to have a more straight, more easily defendable main battle line, and these are the markers, the geographical markers of that line. And the attack troops are the 3rd Battalion of Infantry Regiment 245, 2 platoons from the 13th Company Infantry Regiment 245, 2 light platoons, 14th Regiment, 14th Company Infantry Regiment 249, an Infantry Pioneer Platoon Infantry Regiment 245, and also here the 2nd Battalion Infantry Regiment 442. And the Artillery Regiment 188, namely the 3rd Battalion here, but without the 9th Battery. And also these batteries here from Artillery Regiment 616, and also parts of the Pioneer Battalion, 2nd and 3rd Company here. So as you can see, the main force basically came from Infantry Regiment 245, which is obviously this one here. So these were the battalions mostly involved. Now, before you can launch an operation against a strong point like this, you need to gather intelligence, and that's what they did. Now, some examples. So this is a prisoner of war interrogation report that I found, and they said that between the 10th and the 19th of March 1942, there were 5 prisoners, all of them deserters, and they were interrogated. I should maybe say the actual operation started on the 29th of March. And these prisoners were all from the Rifle Regiment 253. And they basically sum up what they tell them about their parent units and their position. Now, what's interesting for us here is that the 1st Battalion of this Rifle Regiment is in Kalinov. And so we can see here what these deserters told them. So there is one company or 1st company in there. And other companies, there are no certain informations about that, but they assume there are more companies in there. And they said that at the 13th of March, 183 men were in the strong points, 5 officers and 1 politruk, so one political commissar. They were equipped with 1 heavy machine gun, according to the deserters, 3 light machine guns, 1 light mortar, 3 submachine guns. The rest had rifles, of which 10 were automatic rifles. And in terms of equipment, it also says that the Ersatz troops had no gas masks. What's interesting here as a side note, even though as far as I understand, 2nd Battalion was not in Kalinov, but they've also reported 3 light machine guns, 2 Dekterev and 1 German captured one, which I found a bit interesting. But yeah, anyway, this is what the deserters, or one of the deserters, reported in terms of weapons, but they actually got more detailed information out of them. For one thing, the Germans also were often interested in general morale. So 1st Company says that, the deserter from 1st Company says that many are waiting for an opportunity to be taken prisoner. But everybody is afraid to say this in front of the others. Only the Siberians are in a fighting mood. The guy from 6th Company says that the morale was, what's the best word here? The morale was indifferent. They are afraid of German attacks, and they fear that then everything is over because there are not enough heavy weapons. And they also say that the Ukrainian soldiers were not really talking to the other ones, and they didn't see any German flyers or anything like that. And the Politruk as well was afraid that the village could not be held against a German attack. So this is about Kalinov. So apparently the situation seemed grim for the Russians, and this Politruk apparently was a Ukrainian, and they say that he was very comradely with the people. Now, regarding the village of Kalinov, I have some information here that I found. Now, first of all, this is a German photograph, an aerial photograph, which is sadly not that easy to, like, the quality is kind of meh. But you can see there's snow on the ground, and Kalinov is kind of running around here. And they also penciled in suspected firing positions. But yeah, I guess it gives you kind of an overview over the terrain to a degree. You can see the valley up here, and parts of the forests, but I have a clearer map here. Now, this is a map that they created for this operation of Kalinov with the information that they gleaned from the Russian deserters. There's some interesting stuff in here. Now, first of all, obviously, the German front line was roughly in this area, or in this direction at least. But also kind of to the south, because as I said, this position pointed into the German lines. So first of all, they show mine positions here, minefields. It says here minefield of unknown scope, and also maxi machine gun positions. So there was one here, and they also marked alternative positions that they spotted, or the deserters told them about. So you have one Maxim gun here, and then you have Wechselstellung and Wechselstellung. So these are alternative positions where they could wheel the Maxim gun to in case there was an attack. Same thing here. You have a Maxim gun here, and then you have a Wechselstellung, an alternative position over here. So they marked. So there's a forest with some hamlets around, basically in the in the middle of the village. This hamlet, for example, is marked as occupied by Russians. These are apparently not occupied, including the school. These are, of course, not like one long house or something. These are like the typical small Russian houses strung out along this road here, fairly close together. It says here there's no standing post here, but there are patrols. So this is a pretty detailed map here. It also shows stuff like where straw is piled up, and it also shows where scout troops from the Russians go into the different forests. These forests have code names. So we have the double forest here. This is the hedgehog forest, which will later come into play because the Germans fucked up there royally. They say that there are possible mines in this direction, but they don't know where exactly, maybe 2 kilometers east of it, so outside of the map. Here's the long forest down here. And if I remember correctly, outside of the map appears the Russian forest as well. So this is a typical thing that they do where they give these nicknames to terrain features in order to make it easier to remember them. So using this intelligence, they came up with an attack plan. Basically, they were going to attack in the middle of the night using 6 Stoßtruppen or 6 assault troops. So these were just numbered through. So 1 and 2, they were always paired up. 1 and 2 would attack this angle here, 3 and 4 down here. And as you can see, they also show which route these would take through the village and where they would end up. 5 and 6 would come from here outside of the Three Finger Valley, which they would infiltrate before this operation secretly. As I said, this was during the night and during snow. Now, what's also interesting is what you can see here. So we will concentrate on the assault troops, namely on assault troop 1 and 2, because otherwise it gets too complex here. But they also have different units here. For example, the rest of the 2nd Battalion, Infantry Regiment 442, is in the Hedgehog Forest as a counterattacking reserve, right? So in case there's a counterattack, they're in reserve. And there's other positions that are there. For example, in the Three Finger Valley here, there is also one company who is just there to defend here and get any Russians who want to escape in this direction to their own lines to the east. So there is a Riegelstellung, or for abriegeln, which basically means for sealing in the Russians so they can't escape. And the idea was basically that these assault groups, 6 assault groups, would go in from 3 different directions roughly after a short artillery preparation from the howitzers mostly, with these other units in the forest around in support in order to defend against any Russian counterattack or to keep them from or to keep them from escaping from Kalinov after the attack started. So yeah. Shell them with artillery, and then everybody goes in from all sides. There was no tank support of any kind. And later it transpired that many of the heavy weapons that they took with them could not actually be used because of the heavy snow. And the snow actually escalated in quite a big way later, as you will see. So what did one of these Stoßtrupps or assault groups actually look like? Now, they went into quite a bit of detail here. And so I took the liberty of actually making a diagram out of that from FH2 HUD elements. So, what would this look like? First of all, you had, of course, a leader group with a submachine gun as the leader, or a leader with a submachine gun who also had... so I also put the hand grenades here. They went into that much detail for this operation. So this guy, for example, had 4 of the normal hand grenades, and he also had a flare gun. And for the flare gun, he had white flares, which were used for signaling. Now, the main part of this Stoßtrupp was basically divided up into 2 parts. An assault part up here, and kind of a long-range part up here. So the assault part had 3 demolition teams, each with 3 guys equipped like this, which came with egg hand grenades, probably because they could carry more of them, and also 6 geballte Ladungen. Now, I'm not sure if the geballte Ladungen they used were the big green canisters that were used by the pioneers, or if they were using these improvised ones that were made from the Stielhandgranate. That's not quite clear, since there were like pioneers supporting this. It's possible that it was the big green ones, but I thought these looked cooler. But in the end, we don't know. But they did have demolition equipment as a point. Now, these three demolition teams would obviously go in and demolish the enemy positions. There was a mine-clearing team as well, which didn't get any grenades. Their only task was to clear the mine. So these were probably from the engineers. And they also had a flamethrower team in support, which was equipped like this with smoke grenades and a submachine gunner and a flamethrower guy together. Now, for long-range covering fire, each of the demolition teams had a covering team, again 3 because of that, with a light machine gun and also hand grenades here. And also for each of them, one light mortar team, all in all. I didn't have a model for the light mortar, and it didn't specify their crew weapons. They might just have had pistols, frankly, or maybe a rifle. So yeah, three covering teams and one light mortar team with a 5 cm mortar. And then there was a supply team whose only task seems to have been carrying additional egg grenades, and as well as some Gebalteladung and some fog grenades or smoke grenades, sorry. So yeah, this is basically what this Stoßtrupp looked like. This is not like a standing unit. This is not a long-term setup. This is what they made for this operation. And so you can imagine, if we go back to the big map, each of these Stoßtrupps here was equipped like this. So you get a picture of the forces involved here. Alright, so how did it actually go? Well, I have some experience reports, which are a bit like an after-action report, but they are written by the lower ranks. So they are often quite interesting because they offer a very unique view of the fighting. So this first one that I will kind of skip through was written by Oberleutnant Mohr, who was a pioneer platoon leader who was involved here. And he apparently went in with Stoßtrupp number 2 and number 1. And so this is what actually happened. So on the 29th of March 1942, around 3:30 a.m., the approach to Kalinov began. And even though they struggled a lot with it, the crews were not able to bring up the puck or the infantry guns with their munition sleds because of the weather, basically. And the Stoßtrupps, as well as their reserves, were also only able to approach very slowly due to the very high snow. So that was a big problem. So at the beginning of the artillery fire, we were about 500 meters in front of Kalinov. And after the artillery fire ended, we were 300 meters away from the village. And they also say that the artillery fire was quite well placed on the village and was never dangerous for the approaching Germans. Although that might be in part because they were so slow. He goes on. Together with Stoßtrupp 1 and 2, I entered the village. With one group, I stormed together with Stoßtrupp 1 at the east side of the road. So as you can see here, Stoßtrupp 1, and as was planned, they went in here at the east side of the road, and this pioneer leader was with them. I used one group to defend the operations of Stoßtrupp 1 to the east, and the rest of the reserve that we had went through and cleaned the houses and basements right of the road. We made some prisoners here. In the middle of the village, I suddenly heard Feldwebel Krabbel, we will hear about him later as well, call my name and ask for machine gun support. And this leads me to believe that this pioneer leader was in charge of one of this reserve or covering force. So either the ammunition reserve or he was in charge of one of the machine gun teams, maybe to a degree. It's not quite clear. I immediately took one group with an MG and ran to this assault troop, to the Stoßtrupp. I recognized that the Stoßtrupp Krabbel took fire from a strong point, and he says it was very strong MG and rifle fire, and they were not able to advance. Because of that, I attacked this house with my machine gun and rifleman from the left flank, and they used demolition charges and hand grenades to destroy the position in that house. The Russians who defended that house were mostly killed during that fight, and 5 to 6 men were taken prisoner. Now, this leads me to believe that this was possibly one of these houses, or maybe at the end of the street here, would be my guess, based on some of the later reports as well. After that, I combed through the rest of the village with the Stoßtrupp Reserve, together with Feldwebel Krabbel, house to house, basically, until the village edge, so probably up until here, considering that this is where Stoßtrupp 1 was supposed to end up. And they used hand grenades and demolition charges to break any resistance. At the edge of the village, so probably here, possibly in this house even, which is a bit bigger, there was another Russian machine gun in position, which opened up on Stoßtrupp 1 from a very short range, pinned them down again, and they again attacked it from the left flank, but then a machine gun from the right flank also opened fire on that Russian machine gun. And the machine gunner of that right flank machine gun was wounded in this action. And he himself, the pioneer leader, went always closer with his group. And they again forced this position to surrender with their hand grenades. And Feldwebel Krabbel was wounded, heavily wounded, in fact, during this engagement when a part of the Russians had already surrendered. So this must have been down here where the Stoßtrupp leader of Stoßtrupp 1 was heavily wounded, and as I understand the rest of the documents, he did actually die from these wounds later. And so this pioneer leader, he took charge of this Stoßtrupp because the Stoßtrupp leader was gone. And he says that the Russians tried to attack from two sides, so they tried a counterattack, and he regrouped his people. They let the Russians come close up until 50 meters, and then they suddenly opened up with 2 machine guns and 1 light mortar, as well as some machine pistols and riflemen, and this caused 10 Russians to give themselves up, and some fell, and some managed to escape from the village. And then he says that after the fight was over, he cared for the wounded, collected the prisoners, and sent them back to the regimental HQ. So we are going to rewind a bit here and read another report by Unteroffizier Mederer, who was the leader of Stoßtrupp 2. So he was involved and was very close to this action that we just covered. First of all, he also says that that the artillery fire was fine, and he says that they were about 200 meters away from the village when the artillery fire lifted. He also says that when they were 100 meters away from the village, so roughly in this area here, they found a listening post, and one of the NCOs of the Stoßtrupp beat him to death because he wanted to defend himself. There were no shots because they didn't want to didn't want to give the operation away. So as you can imagine, this was during the night, so they probably snuck up on this poor guy and basically bludgeoned him. He says then that they immediately received fire from the first houses, and that they attacked each house with like a pincer movement and threw hand grenades and geballte Ladungen in there. And he also says that the Russians defended very stubbornly, and that they did not immediately surrender, but only after a fight. He also says that the houses were almost all fortified, but not as well as the German ones, in his opinion. He then mentions that several Russians were trying to flee from Stoßtrupp 1, who advanced down the right side of the street, and they managed to get these fleeing Russians in their flank and kill them with machine guns and submachine guns. One of the houses had apparently been hit directly by an artillery round, and he says that he tried to get out the buried people in there, in the position inside that house, but he says that because of the time being short and because they didn't have enough shovels and such with them, they didn't manage to get these buried people out, and he says that probably several people suffocated in the basement of one of these houses. And he says then in the end that about 1 hour later he met up with Stoßtrupp 4 in the left part of the village. And you can see that meet up here, all according to plan, Stoßtrupp 4 coming from this direction, Stoßtrupp 2 here, Stoßtrupp 1 up here. Lastly, I have another report here by Obergefreiter Damm, who wrote this report, even though he was not in charge of Stoßtrupp 1. That was, of course, the already mentioned Feldwebel Heinz Krabbel, who apparently was heavily wounded and died. Maybe at the point of the account being written, he was already dead. Again, the part about the artillery support is largely the same. He says that while trying to get through the last empty stretch, they were starting to get fire by a medium mortar. And they say that to the right there was a row of houses that had rifle fire come out of it, which would logically have to be this row of houses that gave them some trouble. And they also said that later a light machine gun started to shoot from these houses. Now they advanced towards these houses under covering fire from the light machine guns, and said that they saw Stoßtrupp 5 and 6 come from that direction as was planned. The mortar crew flew away, or ran away at this point apparently, because the Germans came close. And they also met up with what he called Stoßtrupp Limmer, which was probably one of these named after their commander. So when they attacked the final buildings, they suddenly received heavy machine gun fire, and this is what the pioneer leader in the first report obviously mentioned. This position was so it was placed so that the direction of shooting was to the north. So apparently they had a machine gun in here, looking out towards the northern direction, but the crew had noticed the attack and turned around the machine gun, put it into a new position on top of a bunker, is what they said. So this might have been an actual bunker or a fortified house. It's kind of hard to tell. And so they say that the machine gunners dueled it out with this heavy MG, and one got wounded, which we already know. And they say that after that a part of the heavy machine gun crew fled, and Demolition Troop 2 and Covering Troop 2 worked their way there, cleaned the buildings up, and the Russians that tried to escape from the houses were killed by machine gun fire and the machine pistol of the Stoßtrupp leader. So when they were about 30 meters away from the heavy machine gun position, they threw a salvo of hand grenades and assaulted the position. They said that they saw 40 to 50 men, which seems a lot to me, fly from the bunker into the northern direction. So away here to the north, which meant that they were probably under threat, or at least that was the plan, under threat from the hedgehog forest, yeah. But we will talk about that one later. Now, this is where Feldwebel Krabbel got wounded. Now, it says here that up until now he had led the Stoßtrupp, and he also said here that through his brave daredevilry he ripped them forward into action. And he just had given the order to shoot at the fleeing Russians when one of the Russians threw a hand grenade at him from a basement next to him. And he got heavily wounded by that. Now, the light mortar gunner, one Gefreiter Forkel, then ran to that Russian and shot him after slapping him in the face. Another Russian came with another hand grenade out of another hole, but Obergefreiter Stegert beat him to death with his rifle. After that, they pulled 3 more Russians out of that bunker. And during the assault on this position, Obergefreiter Sauer was heavily wounded through a headshot. So there were quite a few losses here. It then goes on to say that 200, 300 meters after they had ran that far, the Russians suddenly turned around and started a counterattack, which was also mentioned by the Stoßtrupp number 2. And they say that they were able to defend against this counterattack because there were other troops that were coming from the right direction as well. And yeah, what's quite interesting here, there are some experiences at the end of this report. First of all, they say for weaponry that they should take in the future as many submachine guns as possible. They also say that rifle fire by the Russians is unaimed and nothing to be afraid of, which, okay, fair enough. I don't know if I would trust in that. In terms of tactics, it's important to search every house as thoroughly as possible for obvious reasons. I mean, they lost their Stoßtrupp leader to a hand grenade. And it also says that the enemy puts up a strong defense against weak enemies, but as soon as stronger forces show up, he will run away. And that the first who run away then pull the rest of them with them. Now, what we will look at now are some reports about casualties. So, during the attack and until Kalinov was taken, you can see there were 2 dead in the 2nd Battalion, 1 wounded, one with damages from frost. Another one died in the staff company. So the losses for the 245th Regiment, as you can see, were fairly low here. Now, what's interesting is what happened later. Damage through frost, basically, or casualties through frost. So what happened is that many of the units that were in these forests around here basically got caught up in a huge snowstorm shortly after Kalinov was taken. It was apparently so bad that the Germans in their report call it a natural disaster, and it was quite surprising. I mean, this is in March, late March, and suddenly there's this huge snowstorm, and these are all the losses they got from basically frost. So, for example, 1st Battalion had 1 dead, 4 first degree, 13 second degree, and 2 third degree. So there were heavy casualties due to the snowstorm. People got lost. 1 was still missing at this point, probably lying dead in some snowdrift. And so in the end, if you look here, in terms of the overall cost of the operation, including the defense later, most people actually, or at least many people, actually got or became casualties due to the weather. So yeah, this snowstorm that suddenly appeared in many ways screwed the operation more up than the Russians, but in the end, of course, it was successful because they did manage in the end to take Kalinov with relatively low losses. Only then, of course, the weather froze them to a degree. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this. I thought it was quite interesting. Another operation that you never really hear about, Operation Resurrection. So yeah, thanks for watching. Have a nice day.